Okay, so if there are no other questions or comments, then let's assume that most of you have downloaded this large ISO file to install this Ubuntu operating system, and that you have downloaded and installed this VirtualBox virtualization manager. If you are using virtualization first time in your life, in general, virtualization works like a time sharing system. Every time your computer does multitasking, in general, what it does, it switches regularly from task to task, and what you think as a multitasking is actually quick switches between one task and another. And one of these tasks may be to emulate different hardware to run some different operating system in the same hardware. And when you open this VirtualBox manager, you should see something like this. Of course, you probably don't have any prepared virtual machines here, so this list here should be empty. And you go to File, Machine. To Machine menu, press New, call it, you could call it like Xubuntu. I will call it this one because here I already have such name, and hopefully it already understands the type of this operating system is Linux, version is Ubuntu based 64-bit, and here you should know something about genealogy of different operating systems. And there are different kind of operating systems, but for practical purposes you should know at least two different types. One is Unix based and another is VMS based. And for some of you who already study in university, probably you may have passed some introduction course about operating systems already. This software which makes your hardware work may be different, and for some very small hardware there may be just one single application built for purpose running without any operating system at all. A typical example where you do not have operating system at all is Arduino systems. If you have some experience with Arduino computers, then you put just one single purpose built application inside it, no operating systems at all. So what operating systems does? Operating system does common things which are done similarly by many different applications, which means mostly input-output operations, networking, file system, graphical interfaces, and other things. And for these Unix-based systems, there are original Unixes still somewhere around, and these are coming from Berkeley's system distribution or BSD systems, and currently as an open source solution these systems are OpenBSD, NetBSD and FreeBSD. This is one of these still alive clones of original Unixes. What kind of Unixes have died out is like IBM X system, coming from IBM, UX system for HP. What else? Unixware from SCO, which was Santa Cruz operating systems, etc. And Sonos is still, Sonos also is still alive as open source solution. But one of important clones, not clone forks, or descendants of this BSD system is two very popular systems. Let's mark them here. So that would be original Unix, and these are died out Unixes, is iOS and MacOS. So these both are BSD based systems with proprietary closed source graphical interface and package management, but in general iOS and MacOS are direct descendants of original Unix operating system, and Linux based systems are Unix-like system, but is not original descendant because it was originally written from system called Minix, which was also Unix-like but not original Unix. Modern Linux actually is more complicated and more modern than iOS or MacOS or these BSD systems. And I would say that every operating system sooner or later wants to become Linux-based operating system, because even Microsoft recently started to develop their own distribution of Linux-based operating system. And so about VMS-based system is Windows NT, which become Windows 7, which become Windows 10. And so many things, and again, Windows NT is a VMS-like system. It is not direct descendant, so not source code was taken from this VMS system, but Windows NT was just an operating system called VMS written by Microsoft, so all these influences and design what was in VMS system was built into Windows NT, which was then Windows 7, Windows Vista and Windows 10. So these are today most popular systems for users. Probably this is the most popular operating system. This is for either tablets and phones and for computers, and this is for more technical guys who do not want to pay royalty and money to run this operating system. And then if we look particularly about Linux, there are hundreds of Linux-based distributions, but the most prominent ones for Linux are Debian, Slackware, and Red Hat. So these are the most prominent ancestors and basics systems, and Slackware is the closest system to this BSD systems, so this is much Unix-like. Debian probably is the most popular one, and system based on Debian is called Ubuntu, and system based on Ubuntu with different graphical interface, which is lighter and faster, is this Xubuntu. So it is Debian based. For Slackware, what we can say, there is a system called ZenWalk on top of it, and for Red Hat, probably the most popular one is system called CentOS and Fedora. And what is differences? There are some differences about configuration, so this Slackware system is much more Unix-like system. And all they have different package managers. For Debian, you install files with extension Debian. For Slackware, you install files with extension tjz or tar.gz as archives, and for Red Hat, you install files with extension RPM. And there are other differences, but the most biggest difference is package management, how you download and install software from the internet. For Slackware it is just archives and you deal with dependency by yourself. For Debian it's Debian packages, and for Red Hat it's RPM. And here, if we say that it is base type is, so here you see some of these kind of operating system, Microsoft Windows, Linux, Sun Solaris, which is a true Unix system, BSD, which is also true Unix system, IBM OS2, died out, different kind of operating system, and MacOS X. This is old school name, currently it's called just MacOS, not MacOS version 6, actually is Roman letter 10, MacOS 10. And some other systems, and particularly for Linux, so here you see different kind of distributions, but saying that it is Ubuntu based system is good enough for us. So then we should increase this till to anything what is up to green sector here, and if you like powers of 2, somewhere here should be chatternull day in sesh. For example, this is power of 2 times of megabytes or gigabytes in this case in total of your virtual memory for this virtual machine. So this is how much of random access memory will be reserved for this virtual machine. So everything which is in this green sector of this size is good, and so you take as much as possible which is considered safe for your computer. Then we need to create a storage for this virtual machine, which will be large file inside our physical computer in folder called VirtualBox VMs. So somewhere here. And we choose default options here, default options here, default options here. So not everything will be allocated immediately, but it will increase this file for this virtual disk by chunks when it will be needed. And here 10 gigabytes may not be enough if you will use for different purposes. My recommendation is to reserve at least 20 gigabytes of disk size for this virtual machine. If you can afford more, you can afford even more, but 20 gigabytes here is safe minimum. And then we need to say from where this virtual machine will boot up, where it will read operating system, and we go to settings of this virtual machine, then we go to the storage, And it should have two controllers. One is for virtual disk, which we already prepared, and another is for virtual CD or DVD ROM. And here we press on this button of CD DVD, choose a disk or file, and then you choose this ISO file. And if you got confused how to select this one, there's other option. Here in file you have entry called File Virtual Media Manager. You can add just entry for these optical disks. So you go to optical disks tab, say add here, and add this as another entry, and then inside this settings for virtual machine you should be able to just choose it from this list here. And then we can optimize it a little bit. For system, probably we do not need to virtualize floppy disk. We can switch it off. Then we can increase number of physical processors used for this virtual machine. By default it uses only one, but usually modern computers have at least 2 or 4 or even more if you are some gamer. And again, here you can increase up to safe limit for this virtual machine. And then we can go to acceleration. And there are two different types of virtualization: full virtualization and para or partial virtualization. What does it mean? For full virtualization, this guest operating system even doesn't know that it doesn't run on physical hardware. This operating system thinks that it is only operating system running on this hardware. So good thing is that you can run unprepared operating system in this virtual machine. Bad thing is that it works slower. And therefore is another virtualization called para virtualization, which means partial virtualization, where this guest operating system actually knows that it works inside virtual machine. So it needs to be prepared. It needs to have specific device drivers for these virtual machine drivers, but it works faster. And for Microsoft Windows, this para virtualization standard which is supported is called Hyper 5 or Hyper-V. I think it's 5 because it's Roman V or Roman 5. And for me, this para virtualization standard is KVM. So you choose that, and I don't know about if you are using MacOS, then you can just use default. So, yeah, somebody wants to ask something. Did you check that virtualization is enabled in your hardware? So I think that problem may be here, that if you see some strange problems in this acceleration, it may be, if you are not sure how to check it, just choose default and hope that it will still work. But if you see some errors here, probability is quite high that your hardware supports virtualization, because it should. If your computer is newer than 15 years old, it should support virtualization, but it may have it disabled. you may try to Google for your particular hardware, and one of things is do not use any acceleration at all, but then probably your quality of life will not be very good because this virtual machine may be very slow. So I choose this one and it should work for me, and I think that's it for general settings. I may check what it's about network, but we will deal with network later. So that's about preparing it up. So just to recap things, here you should say that you have two medias as a storages inside your virtual machine. One is created file here, which will be used as a virtual disk for this virtual machine, and another is reference to this ISO file, which is binary image of DVD disk. And then you should try to boot it up, and for some strange reason it still double checks or asks me which media should be used to boot this virtual machine up, and double check that you say that it is location of your installation disk image. And then here you may press space if you like, but we will just allow this operating system to start. So here I will use English as a standard default language. You may change it later if you like, and I will choose install Xubuntu here, but here I will not use English United States keyboard layout. I will use EKL Latvian modern keyboard layout. You may use Latvian apostrophe. Usually this apostrophe key is used as a dead key to add diacritic marks to these Latin letters. So you choose probably this one. I will choose this one. So I will not do this, because if something would go wrong with our settings, we will just lose more time, because it will work slower. And continue. And here we say erase disk and install Xubuntu. So do not freak out, it will not erase your physical disk, but it will erase everything from this virtual image or virtual disk, which means inside where these systems, inside this large file. So trust me, if you are using this setup wizard inside virtual machine, then it will not erase your entire hard disk for your computer, but only for this virtual machine. And how do I know that it's inside virtual machine? Because I have separate window here from which I can just jump out. And I will say install now. So it to double check it asks, do I'm sure about this, and yes, I'm sure in this case. So time zone is Riga, that's okay. And what were requirements? I think requirements were student, I think. So you can use different username for your convenience, but remember, every time we will talk about configuration management, and we will talk about configuration management quite a lot. If you will choose different user, whatever, then you will need to remember to do mapping between concepts, that what is mentioned as a student or something else is actually different in your particular virtual environment. So I will follow this guide here, and my username will be student. And this will be my password, student 007. If you are curious, you may expand this part here. You may see terminal output, what is exactly happening there. So while we are looking here in this progress, some of you may be confusing about this AMD 64 in brackets. And in Linux community, they do not care about manufacturers, but they care about standards used. And if we talk about IBM PC compatible 64-bit processors, standard which is followed by both leading manufacturers AMD and Intel was introduced by AMD. When Intel developed their first 64-bit processor, which was called Intel Itanium, it was not PC compatible processor, and sometimes it's called Itanium architecture or IA in Latvian, but it didn't get popular because it was quite expensive, and Microsoft Windows didn't work on it because it was not PC compatible hardware, and AMD introduced their first processor which was still compatible with personal computers, And of course it took market because it could be used to run Microsoft Windows, and therefore nowadays both Intel and AMD produces processor conforming to this standard introduced by AMD, and which is sometimes called x86 underscore or dash 64 or AMD 64. So here my computer is using Intel processor, but this is Intel processor with this AMD 64 standard. So, and that's where this comes from. You can check it, for example. So say vendor ID is genuine Intel, but its architecture, where does it say it about it? So standard is this AMD 64. So while waiting for this to finish, do you have some questions or comments so far? Looks like I have finished this first part of installation. So I can see here in status line of VirtualBox that this virtual DVD disk was ejected automatically, so I just press enter here. And now this operating system inside virtual machine should be booting up, loaded and executed from this virtual hard disk. Now when this is done, we can agree about this and install additional language tools. It's not required, but it will help, for example, if you use LibreOffice Writer to write documents inside this virtual machine or whatever. So here, pay attention to the status line. This shows you what is hotkey to switch between your virtual machine and your mother or native operating system. I have changed it to right Windows key because it's not much used in Linux-based operating systems, but this key actually is something else. I think left or right control key or something else. It sometimes needs to be known, especially if you switch to full screen mode, how you can escape from virtual machine without shutting it down. And now let's first complete this standard exercise, so we can open this browser inside virtual machine. Open website odo.lv training/java, no /ads, and preparation of workstation. So I think I have done this part. Now we need to do some preparation, and for you who are beginners in IT, you may not be familiar with application called terminal. So what is terminal? Terminal was first used as a physical hardware to connect to real computer. Let's say this one. Wikipedia. And terminal is not computer. Terminal is device which reads pressed keys from your keyboard and sends through the wire to real computer and prints out. Even older terminals printed it out into paper, but then they introduced these electronic terminals which printed out into cathode ray tube output here on screen. So hardware in old times for real computers looked like this. So here was some big box, at least few by few meters, and then there was wires connected to it with these terminals. Display, keyboard, display, keyboard, display, keyboard. So data were sent from pressed keyboards to this computer, and data were sent back to display here on the screen or display to print something out. And actual processing for central processing unit, for random access memory, for hard drive, etc. was happening inside this big box. And later these real computers were called mainframes. And some smaller computers were introduced, like mini computers, which still worked approximately in the same way as these mainframes or large computers. And then microcomputers were introduced, which are mostly IBM personal computer, not CP, but personal computers, which had everything more local. So this box was much smaller, and it has keyboard and display very close to it, usually just only for single user. And starting from PCs, you could introduce so-called virtual terminal. And virtual terminal is that you do these things, send data from keyboard and print something out, is just as a software, not as a hardware. And so virtual terminal looks like this. You press Ctrl-Alt-T for terminal, and here you can write keystrokes which are sent to your computer, and here you see some output into this. So what I see here as a inside software is still descendant from this real hardware all long time ago. So you open this terminal either from start menu, somewhere in accessory I think, terminal emulator, but almost all Linux distributions I have used, in most of cases you open it with hotkey combination Ctrl-Alt-T. And this is our default terminal, which is not the most complicated and not best one, but it is small and fast. And then you write different kind of commands inside it. For example, print working directory, pwd, shows what is my current directory, and this current directory is like current folder in your graphical file manager. So here are different kind of folders, and current folder, content of which I'm seeing here, is /home/student. So here a little bit about file system. In Unix-like system, starting position of file system is /. So what would be C:\\/ in a VMS based operating system like Microsoft Windows or C or D is just / for Unix-like systems. And so the slashes are the limiters, how you show inside string what is folder inside folder. And then all these different users, they have their home folder inside home folder, and here are quite many confusing parts. There is folder /home where many subfolders may be. For example, and there may be many other users. Then they have their own subfolders with identifier of their user. And common home is folder /home, but particular home for the student, for example, you can click on your home folder here, is /home/student. So this is my own individual home. Sometimes you may get confused if you are beginner in Unix-like system what they are talking about. Common home for many users, or individual home as a subfolder of home folder for particular user. Similarly, you may get confused about what is root, because root of file system for Unix-like system is just /, but there is one privileged user called root, which we cannot access from this / and root. This is home folder for root user, which is super duper administrator for Linux systems and for most of Unix systems. For some BSD systems I know this super duper user is called wheel. I do not know about MacOS. It also may be called differently than root. So that's about file system. Now you type different kind of commands inside it. You just write text, and first word of this command means execute this executable file. Like when you double click on executable file in your graphical file manager, like I do not know. for example, uzsver bin LibreOffice. So here is file. This is not actual binary. So you double click on it, it's still shell file, and this. And you should probably run it, but you can just say libre in terminal, and you open this particular executable, which is this LibreOffice Office Suite application. So first word inside terminal is executable. If it's not executable, you get, or for example, you'll get different kind of errors. And then you may add extra words inside this command as additional information what this executable should do. In this case, cd tilde means change directory to your home directory. And cd tilde is the same as cd without any parameters at all. For example, print working directories /home/student/downloads, cd tilde goes back to your home folder, and cd means like you are double clicking in this graphical file manager. For example, you go to downloads folder, and so you go back. And cd without parameters is the same as cd tilde. And then you may sometimes need to type many commands at once, or in general it is safe that for all these guides you see somewhere in internet when you do something in a terminal, even though you see large block of commands at once, usually you execute them line by line. So everything here is grouped together just for easier reading, but if you just copy paste, you need to copy paste these line by line. Sometimes you may copy paste everything at once. For example, if semicolons are added as delimiters between commands, you can copy and paste, and they will be executed. And sometimes you are required to copy paste everything if these commands are split in several lines only for readability. Then these commands finishes with backslash or reverse slash. So you copy everything, paste everything. Here for security purposes it says what exactly you will be executing. And so this is how you copy and paste. You can copy and paste using right click here from this context menu, but in Unix-like systems I think MacOS also follows this old school Unix-like system. They have two different buffers initially for Unix-like system, Linux including. Only clipboard was so-called selection buffer. You select something and it is already into this selection buffer. And in terminal you can get out content of selection buffer pressing shift and insert keys. But to be compatible with Microsoft Windows, they also introduced another buffer which you can do with explicit copy and explicit paste. Usually with right click and this menu. And sometimes the difference between this selection buffer and the clipboard buffer or copy paste buffer may be confusing, because here is one simple plain text editor called Mousepad, which also supports both of these selections. So I have some text here, don't be confused that instead of ASDF, I write 111 because I use this Latvian modern keyboard layout. So I can select something and shift insert. Maybe it doesn't support this one. Okay, then we can do everything in terminal. For example, I have some command ls and pwd, and I can double check and press shift insert, and then it pastes this selection buffer. But if I double click and say copy and I say paste, then I paste pwd, so shift, okay, and then select this, shift insert prints from selection buffer, paste pastes from copy and paste buffer. So that may be a little bit confusing. And then why it is shift insert? Because Ctrl C is to terminate some running program. One of programs which runs infinitely is monitor in terminal called top. You type top, press enter, and it shows something like this, and it runs infinitely. Of course you can close the entire virtual terminal, but you can stop this continuously running application using Ctrl C. Okay, so that's about terminal. Now about this customization and configuration. We will say to our computer that when we refer to computer just name Buca server or BC server, its IP address will be following. What this server is? This server is actually a server with domain name called tools.odo.lv. If we would be working inside the real class with real computers, we would have some dedicated laptop called Buca server with some internal IP address, and we would refer to that computer inside this local area network in that class. But because here we work remotely from many places in the world, instead of this dedicated server in local area network, we will use dedicated server with domain name tools.odo.lv, but to not rewrite all these recipes and guides what to do during this class, we will assign different name to this server called Buca server. So what do we do? We run following command, either type it or more properly you copy and paste it inside terminal. And first word means run this executable command, and this sudo command means escalate my privileges from normal user to super duper privileged user. And then we see two other words. This word means run mousepad editor. After that, for example, if I open new terminal and run mousepad, you see this editor opened here. But without sudo, permissions, I open this editor as a student user. For example, I cannot save anything inside root file system here because I do not have write permissions on root file system as a normal user. And then with this privileged permissions, I run mousepad editor, and then when this mousepad editor is opened, it reads a configuration file located in folder etc in root of the file system and file named hosts. So I enter here, I write my password, and here don't be confused, so you don't see anything here. It is old school Unix-like standard that there is no visual feedback for your password, so it doesn't show anything. Just type it and press enter. And if you typed it correctly, then you see that this mousepad text editor was opened with non-empty file, because there is some content in this file located in folder etc already. And we add new entry here. This third line. Where is this mousepad here? So for me it looks following, and then as I save it through the menu or press Ctrl S here. And now when I send these packets to this server and see does it respond, I see that referring to this server just by simple name, but the server, not fully registered domain name, it responds because it got its IP address from this configuration file here. And then we need to enable additional repositories to download software. So first system which introduced package management from the internet was Linux, and then after that it was introduced in MacOS and was marketed very heavily as usual, that Steve Jobs or his ghost was developed this approach. But how most of package managers works today, somewhere in internet you have some web servers which provides files in internet to download, and you have some package manager, and for Debian based Linux systems it is either apt-get or aptitude or just apt for Ubuntu. So, and it downloads file with extension deb in our case from the internet and extracts it. To check that it is not malware, all these are signed with public key of these developers, so you check their consistency, etc., and then you extract or install it. And for legal reasons, not all of these repositories somewhere on internet, let's say internet as a cloud, are enabled. So we can download these packages from many web servers, but only from some servers we can download these packages initially. Mostly these are legal reasons, because some of these can provide closed source applications which we need to agree about end user license agreements to download and use them, so they are not enabled. And there is configuration file which just says what kind of addresses we will have for these web servers to download these packages. And references to these remote repositories are in other configuration file in folder etc subfolder apt, and file is sources.list. So similarly, we open Mosipad text editor with escalated user privileges, and we open this file. And here we search for everything which is hash space deb and replace it with deb. And you shouldn't uncomment first line with hash not space deb, because this means for every new installed package first look in CD-ROM, because we will not have this CD-ROM in most of the time added to our virtual machine. It should always look on these remote repositories. And it is just simple blind text file as for most of Unix-like operating systems, so no Microsoft Windows registry. And good thing about such files is that there is also syntax how to add comments. So one of very huge drawbacks for Windows registry is that there is no way how to document or describe these entries. But for Unix-like system, you always have some format what are comments. In this case, everything which starts with hash is comment, everything which doesn't start with hash is not comment. And here you see, for example, that some of packages will be downloaded from this web server, and here you have these lists of different packages. I do not know precise content of these, but these are just simple web servers from which you download these packages and install. And because for these which are open source applications, so you can freely and legally make copies for them, in many cases you use so-called mirrors of these repositories to make it more scalable. And in my case, because I'm in Latvia, I'm actually be using web server as a mirror for this first repository with domain name lv.archive.ubuntu.com, because it is physically closer to my computer than just archive.ubuntu.com. So we have enabled these other entries to other software repositories. And then we can copy paste this long command here. And what does it do? First, it updates list of these remote packages and repositories. Then it does full upgrade of local operating system, and then it cleans up all unneeded packages. Depending on how old this DVD image is and how many updates are done for this, it may take some time to download everything. Somewhere here you will need to press enter here, because it is not automatically set to confirm. So here it asks you, do you want to confirm to download and update these packages? Capital letter means default choice, non-capital letter means non-default choice. So you can either write yes and enter, or if you agree with default choice, here just press enter. And of course, if you would use Red Hat based Linux operating system, then principle would be absolutely the same, but details would be completely different, because we would use yum as a command line package manager, and configuration files would be different, but idea would be the same. We need entries to remote repositories. We need to download these packages and install them. And good thing about Linux-based operating system is that this coverage, what you can download and update using standard package manager, is much bigger. For example, for Microsoft Windows, you can download and update in the same fashion only Microsoft Windows itself and Microsoft Office. For other vendors coming from other company, other applications coming from other vendors, usually they have different managers to download and update their software, so it's not so centralized and common. There are still some applications which are not put into these common repositories because of technical or legal reasons, but in many cases everything you need you can install just using the standard package manager. And of course, for any Linux workstation or Linux-based workstation, there is graphical package manager which you can use from graphical interface, but I have not cared to know for which particular distribution, which particular graphical package manager is used. So somewhere here is software and update, software updater, but I don't know how these executables are actually called. So you can do this if it's easier for you, but in most of cases you will find out that it's much easier to document and much easier to reproduce to do these things inside terminal. And of course everything you can do in terminal you can write as a simple plain text file as this interpreted script and then just execute this script. Okay, while I'm waiting about this, particularly about Ubuntu and about versions. So we are using operating system which is based on Ubuntu, which is based on Debian. And particularly Ubuntu is developed by a company called Canonical. And versions for this Ubuntu operating system and derivatives is at first number is last 2 digits of year. For example, 20 means 2020, so this part is used, and then dot and months, like 04. So Canonical releases different kinds of operating system, so-called long-term support versions and short-term support. And long-term support versions are released in 2 years in April. So long-term support versions are like, first what they released was something like, I think 06, 04. I started it using from version 08, 04, and now we have 2004. And then they short-term support versions they introduce after half a year. So between this and that they have version also 06, I think 11, 07, 04, and 07, 11 or 10. I don't know. I think 10. And so if you look on time scale, it looks something like this. Long-term version, which is supported for 5 years, and short-term versions supported for half a year or year, maybe year and overlapping, something like this. And then for each 2 years another long-term support version with short-term releases. And if you do not want just to test, etc., you usually use Ubuntu distributions for these long-term support versions. So from package manager perspective and similarities perspective, we are using Ubuntu operating system 20.04. So this is done, and now we can install Java runtime and Maven building and configuration management tool, again just inside this terminal. I will tell details about this in afternoon session, but we install default Java development kit version. And again, we could add -y here to auto-confirm it. Probably it should be somewhere here to be safe. But usually I do not add this because I want to review what exactly will be installed, and then I confirm it just by pressing enter. Well, I'm looking on chat here. I think classmates already answered to Oscar. Where is start menu? Particularly for Xubuntu, default configuration is that start button is not in somewhere in lower left corner, but in upper left corner. I will show you how can you customize it a little bit to make it maybe more conventional. So unfortunately for us, neither of leading integrated development environments are available in standard package manager. Yeah, still no Eclipse. We can install NetBeans IDE using standard package manager if you like, something like sudo apt install NetBeans, and if that would be standard Debian, then that would be either apt-get or apt-tude. But usually these are not latest and greatest versions available. Yeah, it is version 10, but NetBeans latest and greatest stable version of NetBeans is, I think, version 12. So therefore we will download and install them like Microsoft Windows users are doing all the time. So you go to Google it, go to their website, download it and follow instructions how to install it. But I will leave this probably for afternoon session. So I will follow everything which can be still done using standard package manager. And I will show you a little bit about customization. So about customization. So one thing is, you see here that you open or start your virtual machine, you log into it and it shows a software update. And this is very like how Microsoft Windows is disturbing you about these updates. I like to update my system when I'm ready, so I don't like this graphical manager popping up this window about these things. If you are like me and you do not want this disturbing message all the time, of course you can say remind me later here. Then you can remove this package called update-manager. Other thing is what I don't like is different packaging and package management solution invented and developed by Canonical itself. It's called Snap. And Snap is container where you run your application inside container. If you know something about containers, some are very excited about these things, but if you are old enough, then instead of trends you see loops. So initially application may consist only of single executable, but if it's large enough it also has libraries. Okay, let's write it more. So you have some application, it has executable, which you execute, you start it, but from this executable you may read quite a lot of libraries. And when you have many apps, app 1 and app 2 and app 3, many of these libraries may actually overlap. So you can put these as a shared libraries inside the operating system. And everything is great until you get so-called DLL hell, because DLL extension is from dynamically loaded library in Microsoft Windows, because these may have different versions and different versions may work differently, so some application needs one version of this library and another version of library. In Unix-like systems and Linux, it's not so big issue because they always have version number included in their actual name. But still, sometimes this management of shared libraries may be hell. So first was just single executable step. Second step was save disk space and use shared libraries. And when they got tired of this, they introduced containers, which is everything back. You have executable with all libraries only for this particular application. And if you have applications which has shared set of libraries, you have duplicated data, you just use more and more disk space. And when you need to update them, you need to update libraries for this particular application in its own container, for that application for its own container. So you have security nightmares, and because you may update some libraries and security fixes for this app, but then you have duplicates of the same libraries for other apps. Put as a separate copies for other applications. So this snap for standard is do not use shared libraries at all. Use separate copies of all needed libraries for each particular application. So only thing they somehow solve is possible dynamic library hell when something doesn't work properly, but for Unix-like systems it can be solved. It's not so great problem as for Microsoft Windows, but you have duplicated the libraries over all your system, and then you need to update each of them separately if some of libraries, for example widely used libraries for networking in input-output operations, have some security fixes. I don't like this standard, you shouldn't like it either. So we also remove package, which is this package manager for these snap-like applications. So every time I set up some Ubuntu server, I delete these things. Now about some customizations. First thing is it may not be conventional to have this start button here in upper corner. Idea for these who defend their position that start button should be upper corner is about this, how this law is called. Fitts law. So what this Fitts law says, it is practical observation that when you work with graphical interface, it is more convenient that if you don't need to drag your mouse cursor too large distance, and if this target what you need to reach is big enough. So according to Fitts law, interface is much easier to use if buttons are big and closely spaced each to other. So then distance what you need to move is small and your target is big. And it is quite true. Problem is that what this law do not consider is confusion, and what I don't like sometimes is that for some applications the title bar may be similarly shaped as this shelf bar here for these applications, and therefore I think that this ambiguity and unconfusion between title bar of application and shelf is more important, and I like to have this conventional thing that the start button is on the bottom. So first you go to right click somewhere here in free space of panel, go to panel preferences, and then check checkbox called lock panel, and then this panel changes. You see this dotted bar here, and then you can drag and drop, for example, put it into more conventional place, and then lock it again. And then you can do some more customizations, how you group your buttons, etc, etc. Then other thing what you may need to do is, for example, if you work inside virtual machine and outside virtual machine, unfortunately by default copy paste may not work. You can go here and you just say device shared clipboard and say bidirectional, and you copy paste something inside virtual machine, you try to paste it outside virtual machine and you see that it doesn't work. Why? Because this virtual machine needs to have additional device drivers for it to work, and particularly if your guest system is Linux, you need to add additional Linux kernel modules. Installed. Also, it may be needed if you need different screen resolution, which is not provided to you. For example, without these additional device drivers for virtual machine, you may go somewhere in display settings, and you may not see. It depends on what kind of hardware you have for your physical graphical card. If it's not well supported by Linux, actually, if Linux is not well supported by this hardware manufacturer, like Nvidia is very famous of poor support for Linux, then again you may need to install additional drivers. And then I do not know what your Microsoft Windows VirtualBox has. If you choose device inside guest additions CD image, does it work to you? Does this virtual machine has such virtual DVD disk opened? Because for Linux, when I install VirtualBox, it has two packages. And I can install with a single terminal command two different packages. Manager itself, package is called VirtualBox. And VirtualBox-guest-addition-ISO as this DVD disk, or actually binary image of DVD disk for these VirtualBox additions. And therefore, for me, this option works. I go to device, insert, blah blah blah. Probably I need to restart this virtual machine. So if you do not have selection to say this insert this virtual ISO file, again, first you should Google it for yourself. Hopefully you will understand what to do. But idea here is that when you open this common manager of VirtualBox in this window, in File, Virtual Video Manager, there should be one entry for these virtual optical disks called vboxguestadditions.iso or something like this. If you do not have such one, you should search how to get it. And if somebody will solve it, particularly for Microsoft Windows, then you can share it, either we share a screen or write in chat. So, when you insert this virtual CD DVD disk, you open terminal in this current folder. De facto standard is F4, open terminal inside this current folder. So you see that current folder is following, and here you write something like sudo, I think bash, and actually we can check what was these instructions to check that instructions are correct. Sudo auto runner sage. As you can see, it opens some little bit different terminal. I think it is Xterm. Not Control T, but Control Alt T. Yeah, this one. So you see that here it says running kernel modules will not be replaced until the system is restart. So we need to restart our system again. And now you can check that in device menu shared clipboard is enabled and it's bidirectional, so this means copy paste should work between from virtual machine to host and from host back to guest inside virtual machine. I have never used shared folders. I have never used drag and drop. You can try to use this by yourself, but we can open in accessories. Usually we need to copy paste just text. So we write some text here, Ctrl A, Ctrl C inside virtual machine, open text editor here in host system. Looks like it's working. And copy paste from here, copy in host system, paste here, and looks like it is working for me. And you can, so only thing I left for afternoon session is installing Eclipse Integrated Development Environment, because I will tell you about other things and how can you use it. But in general, I think, let's double check. That's it about setting up your virtual environment. So if for some reason your virtual environment doesn't work, if your Windows for some reason is still 32-bit version, then without good device driver support, in theory you can run 64-bit version of guest operating system inside 32-bit version of your host operating system. In practice, in most cases, doesn't work. Then you can use, for example, Xubuntu 32-bit version. But I think that they dropped support for 32-bit version of system some time ago. So last 32-bit version for Xubuntu operating system is 18.04. So that means 2 years before 2004. It is still supported because it is April 2021. Not supported anymore, but it can be usable. So there shouldn't be too much of differences between Xubuntu 18.04 and Xubuntu 20.04. Or you can use any other Debian-based system as your guest operating system. Debian itself or Ubuntu. I think Ubuntu is still supported. It's also dropped their support, but there is another lightweight Ubuntu-based distribution called Lubuntu with, again, little bit different graphical manager, which is still much lighter than standard Ubuntu. And maybe this one still supports 32-bit hardware because it's intended for older computers and slower computers. Then other thing what you can do for MacOS users, you may try to use native operating system, and for Windows users you also may try to use native operating system, because in theory Java works everywhere, but of course sometimes differences inside your hardware and inside your system matters. So if somebody will need this option, we may investigate this in more details if you actually need to investigate them. Any questions or comments so far?